Britain has often been described as a small island with an outsized role in history. Nestled off the coast of continental Europe, it was long seen as a remote and mysterious land at the edge of the known world. Yet from this island would one day emerge a kingdom that conquered seas, forged an empire on which the sun never set, and gave birth to ideas and institutions that reshaped global civilization. Parliamentary democracy, industrial capitalism, and modern constitutional monarchy. The story of England is not a smooth or peaceful journey. It is a tale of invasions and resilience, of kings and commoners, of fire and renewal. Across 2 millennia, waves of settlers and conquerors left their mark. Celts, Romans, Anglo-Saxons, Vikings, Normans, and beyond. Each added new layers of culture, language, and governance, gradually shaping a national identity that continues to evolve today. To understand the rise of Britain as a world power, one must begin at the very beginning, with the first peoples of the island and with the great empire that once claimed it as a distant frontier, Rome.
Long before England as we know it existed, the island was inhabited by Celtic tribes known for their warrior spirit, elaborate rituals, and deep connection to the natural world. These tribes lived in hill forts, worshipped gods in sacred groves, and were guided by druids who served as priests, judges, and keepers of oral tradition. To the Mediterranean world, Britain was a land of tin, furs, and mystery, distant and untamed. The first serious encounter with the wider world came in 55 BCE, when Julius Caesar led a daring expedition across the English Channel. Though the Romans did not stay, Caesar's accounts ignited a fascination with the island. Nearly a century later, in 43 CE, Emperor Claudius launched a full-scale invasion. Roman legions swept across the land, subduing many tribes and establishing Britain as a province of the empire. For nearly 4 centuries, Roman Britain was transformed. Roads and towns were built, trade networks expanded, and Roman law and governance took root. Cities such as Londinium, Camulodunum, and Verulamium became centers of administration and commerce. The imposing Hadrian's Wall, stretching across northern England, symbolized the edge of Roman power, separating the empire from the unconquered highlands of the Picts in Scotland. Roman influence also reshaped religion and culture. Pagan cults mingled with local traditions, and by the 4th century, Christianity had begun to spread among the population, planting seeds that would one day transform Europe. Yet beneath the veneer of Roman order, resistance never vanished. Tribal revolts erupted, most famously the Iceni Rebellion led by Queen Boudica around 60 CE, which nearly drove the Romans from the island. By the early 5th century, the empire itself was faltering. Beset by invasions and internal decline, Rome withdrew its legions from Britain. With their departure, the province was left exposed, vulnerable to new waves of migration and conquest. The age of Roman Britain had ended, but the foundation it laid in roads, cities, and cultural exchange would echo through the centuries to come.
When the Roman legions withdrew in the early 5th century, Britain was left adrift. Without the empire's protection, towns decayed, trade networks collapsed, and the once mighty Roman roads grew silent. Into this vacuum came new peoples from across the sea, the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, Germanic tribes from present-day Denmark and northern Germany. They arrived first as mercenaries, invited by local leaders to defend against raids, but soon they began to settle, carve out kingdoms, and impose their own culture and language. Thus began the Anglo-Saxon era, a time of both hardship and creativity.
The native Britons were pushed westward into Wales and Cornwall, while the newcomers established the Heptarchy, 7 competing kingdoms that included Northumbria, Mercia, Wessex, Kent, East Anglia, Essex, and Sussex. These kingdoms were often at war with one another, yet together they laid the foundation of English identity. It was in this era that Old English began to form, blending Germanic speech with traces of Latin and Celtic. It was also the age of heroic poetry, where warriors and kings were immortalized in epic tales like Beowulf. Life was harsh, but loyalty, kinship, and valor were celebrated as guiding virtues of the new society. The 7th century brought a profound transformation: Christianity's return. Missionaries from Rome, led by St. Augustine of Canterbury in 597, and from Ireland, led by Celtic monks, spread the faith across the kingdoms. Churches and monasteries became centers of learning, preserving classical knowledge and nurturing a new spiritual culture. From Lindisfarne and Jarrow in the north emerged scholars like the Venerable Bede, whose ecclesiastical history of the English people remains one of the most important sources for early English history.
Yet, even as the Anglo-Saxons consolidated power, new storms gathered from the north. Beginning in the late 8th century, terrifying longships appeared on the coasts. The Vikings had arrived. These Norse raiders from Scandinavia brought fire and fear, sacking monasteries and towns, most infamously the attack on Lindisfarne in 793. Over time, their raids evolved into invasions and settlements. Large portions of eastern England fell under Viking control, a region known as the Danelaw, where Norse law and customs prevailed. Amid this chaos, one kingdom rose above the rest: Wessex. Under the leadership of King Alfred the Great, 871 to 899, Wessex resisted Viking conquest and became the nucleus of a united England. Alfred not only defended his lands, but also promoted education, legal reform, and the translation of key texts into English, earning his reputation as both a warrior and a scholar king. By the 10th century, Alfred's successors had reconquered much of the Danelaw, bringing England closer to unification. However, the Viking threat never fully vanished. In the early 11th century, waves of invasions culminated in the rise of King Canute the Great, a Danish ruler who forged a North Sea empire, encompassing England, Denmark, and Norway. His reign was surprisingly stable and prosperous, yet it highlighted England's vulnerability to foreign domination. The Anglo-Saxon line was restored with Edward the Confessor, but his death in 1066 without an heir set the stage for one of the most dramatic turning points in English history, the Norman conquest. The age of Anglo-Saxons and Vikings was about to give way to a new chapter that would permanently transform England's language, culture, and destiny.
The year 1066 stands as one of the most pivotal in English history. With the death of Edward the Confessor, who left no direct heir, the English throne was fiercely contested. Harold Godwinson, the powerful Earl of Wessex, was crowned king, but his claim was immediately challenged by 2 formidable rivals, Harold Hardrada of Norway and William, Duke of Normandy. After defeating Hardrada at the bloody Battle of Stamford Bridge, Harold rushed south, only to meet William's forces at Hastings. On that October day, Harold fell, struck, legend says, by an arrow to the eye, and William emerged victorious. England had a new master, William the Conqueror. The Norman conquest forever transformed England. William imposed a feudal system, redistributing land to his Norman barons and displacing much of the old Anglo-Saxon nobility. Castles rose across the countryside as symbols of Norman dominance, while the Domesday Book of 1086 catalogued the kingdom's wealth and resources in astonishing detail.
Culturally, the conquest introduced Norman French as the language of the court, law, and aristocracy, blending with Old English over time to form Middle English. Under William's successors, the Norman dynasty expanded its power, but it was the Plantagenet kings who would preside over centuries of turbulence and glory. Henry II, 1154 to 1189, established the foundations of English common law and clashed bitterly with the Church, culminating in the martyrdom of Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury. His son, Richard the Lionheart, became a legendary figure of the Crusades, while his younger brother, King John, faced disaster at home. John's disputes with his barons led to the sealing of the Magna Carta in 1215, a landmark document that, though limited at the time, planted the seeds of constitutional government.
The Plantagenet age was also an era of relentless war. England's monarchs claimed vast territories in France through inheritance and conquest, sparking centuries of conflict across the Channel. The most famous of these was the 100 Years' War, 1337 to 1453, during which English armies under leaders like Edward III and Henry V won stunning victories at battles such as Crécy, Poitiers, and Agincourt. Yet despite these triumphs, England eventually lost almost all of its continental holdings, retaining only Calais. At home, the late Middle Ages were marked by turmoil. The catastrophic Black Death of the 14th century decimated the population, wiping out nearly half of England's people and reshaping its economy and society. Peasant revolts, most notably the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, challenged the rigid feudal order, though they were brutally suppressed. Meanwhile, the English Parliament, first convened under Simon de Montfort in 1265, gradually gained influence, laying the groundwork for future struggles between crown and commons. By the 15th century, dynastic conflict consumed the realm. The Wars of the Roses, 1455 to 1487, pitted the rival houses of Lancaster and York in a brutal civil war for the throne. Kings rose and fell in quick succession: Henry VI, Edward IV, Richard III, until finally, in 1485, Henry Tudor defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field. With his victory, Henry VII founded the Tudor dynasty, ushering in a new age of centralized monarchy and the dawn of early modern England. The Norman and Plantagenet centuries had reshaped England from a conquered kingdom into a powerful, though fractured realm. They left behind enduring legacies, the seeds of constitutional rule, a rich medieval culture, and a monarchy both strengthened and scarred by constant conflict. The victory of Henry Tudor at Bosworth Field in 1485 ended the bloody Wars of the Roses and established the Tudor dynasty, a line that would dominate English history for more than a century. As Henry VII, he restored stability to a fractured kingdom, curbing the power of unruly nobles and strengthening the monarchy's finances. Through strategic marriages and careful diplomacy, he secured England's fragile throne, ensuring his son would inherit a realm far stronger than the one he had claimed with his sword. That son was Henry VIII, one of the most infamous and transformative monarchs in English history. Ascending the throne in 1509, Henry at first seemed the perfect Renaissance prince, handsome, athletic, and cultured. Yet his reign became defined by his relentless quest for a male heir and his dramatic break with the Catholic Church. When Pope Clement VII refused to annul Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon, Henry defied Rome, declared himself head of the Church of England, and seized vast monastic lands. This English Reformation not only transformed the nation's religion, but also drastically expanded royal power. Henry's 6 marriages, some ending in divorce, others in execution, symbolized the turbulence of his reign. Yet his bold defiance of papal authority forever changed the course of English history.
The succession after Henry's death in 1547 revealed the uncertainty his policies had unleashed. His only son, Edward VI, ruled briefly and pushed Protestant reforms further, but his early death left the throne to his half-sister Mary I. A staunch Catholic, Mary sought to reverse her father's reforms, marrying Philip II of Spain and launching a campaign of religious persecution that earned her the grim title Bloody Mary. Her death in 1558, however, brought to the throne her half-sister, Elizabeth I, who would prove one of England's greatest monarchs.
The Elizabethan age shone as a golden era of exploration, cultural flourishing, and relative stability. Elizabeth skillfully navigated the dangerous religious divide, crafting a moderate Protestant settlement that endured for generations. She supported daring voyages of exploration, such as those of Sir Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh, laying the foundations of England's global ambitions. At home, her reign saw the flowering of English literature, with William Shakespeare and his contemporaries reshaping drama and poetry. Yet, Elizabeth's reign was not without peril. She faced conspiracies, plots, and the looming threat of foreign invasion. Her execution of her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots, in 1587 eliminated one Catholic rival, but provoked Spain into launching the Spanish Armada the following year. Against the odds, England triumphed, the Protestant wind scattering Philip II's mighty fleet and securing Elizabeth's reputation as a defender of her realm and faith. When Elizabeth died, childless, in 1603, the Tudor dynasty ended and the crown passed to the Stuarts of Scotland. Yet, the Tudors had transformed England beyond recognition. They had forged a strong, centralized monarchy, reshaped the nation's religious identity, and laid the groundwork for England's emergence as a global power. The age of dynastic feuds and medieval uncertainty had given way to a new era of ambition, conflict, and expansion. With the death of Elizabeth I in 1603, the Tudor line ended and the crown passed to her cousin, James VI of Scotland, who became James I of England, uniting the crowns of England and Scotland under a single monarch. James, son of the ill-fated Mary, Queen of Scots, was intelligent and ambitious, but often clashed with Parliament. He believed firmly in the divine right of kings, while Parliament insisted on its growing authority, especially regarding taxation. James's reign also saw the commissioning of the King James Bible, one of the most influential works in the English language, and the tense struggle with Catholic conspirators, most famously the failed gunpowder plot of 1605, led by Guy Fawkes. When James died in 1625, his son, Charles I, inherited the throne. Charles, like his father, clashed with Parliament over money and power, but he proved even more stubborn. His belief in absolute monarchy, combined with his unpopular marriage to a French Catholic princess, aroused deep suspicion. In 1629, after repeated conflicts, Charles dissolved Parliament and ruled alone for 11 years in what became known as the personal rule. During this time, he imposed heavy taxes without parliamentary consent and enforced strict religious conformity under Archbishop William Laud, alienating both Puritans and Scots. By 1640, mounting unrest forced Charles to recall Parliament, but tensions soon erupted into open conflict. The English Civil War, 1642 to 1651, pitted royalists, Cavaliers, loyal to the king, against parliamentarians, Roundheads, led by figures such as Oliver Cromwell. After years of bloody fighting, the parliamentarian New Model Army triumphed, and in 1649, Charles I was tried and executed, a shocking act that shattered the centuries-old belief in the sacredness of monarchy. For the first time in history, England was declared a republic, known as the Commonwealth. Under Cromwell, who rose to power as Lord Protector, England became a de facto military dictatorship. Though Cromwell crushed opposition at home and pursued aggressive campaigns in Ireland and Scotland, his puritanical rule imposed harsh moral codes, closing theaters and banning many forms of entertainment. After his death in 1658, the experiment with republican rule quickly unraveled. By 1660, the monarchy was restored with Charles II, son of the executed king. Known as the Merry Monarch, Charles II presided over a lively court culture and the reopening of theaters and taverns. Yet his reign was also marked by turmoil: the Great Plague of 1665, the Great Fire of London in 1666, and recurring tensions with Parliament over religion and succession. His brother and heir, James II, a Catholic, alarmed Protestant England by openly promoting religious tolerance for Catholics and appointing them to high office. In 1688, fears of a Catholic dynasty led to the Glorious Revolution, a bloodless coup in which Parliament invited William of Orange and his wife, Mary, James II's Protestant daughter, to take the throne. James fled to France, and William and Mary accepted the crown under strict conditions. The Bill of Rights, 1689, enshrined the supremacy of Parliament over the monarchy, guaranteeing certain liberties and cementing the principle that the king ruled not by divine right, but by the will of the people represented in Parliament. The Stuart century was one of revolution, conflict, and profound transformation. From the execution of a king to the rise of parliamentary sovereignty, England emerged from the turmoil of the 17th century with a new constitutional order, a monarchy limited by law, and a government shaped by the enduring balance between crown and parliament.
The Glorious Revolution of 1688 had fundamentally reshaped England's political order, with William III and Mary II accepting the throne under parliamentary terms. The monarchy was no longer absolute. The Bill of Rights, 1689, had enshrined the authority of Parliament, marking the birth of constitutional monarchy in Britain. As the 18th century unfolded, this new balance of power laid the foundation for political stability at home and imperial expansion abroad. When Queen Anne, the last Stuart monarch, died in 1714 without an heir, the crown passed to her distant Protestant relatives in Germany, the House of Hanover. Thus began the reign of George I, who spoke little English and relied heavily on ministers to govern. Out of this arrangement emerged the office of the Prime Minister, with Sir Robert Walpole often regarded as the first to hold the role in practice. Under Hanoverian rule, the monarchy receded further into a ceremonial role, while Parliament and its ministers became the real center of political power. At the same time, Britain was becoming a global power. The 18th century saw fierce rivalry with France and Spain as colonial territories and trade routes were hotly contested. Britain's naval supremacy allowed it to dominate key overseas possessions. Victory in the War of Spanish Succession, 1701 to 1714, brought new territories, and subsequent conflicts, including the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, further expanded British influence. By the mid-18th century, Britain held vast dominions in North America, the Caribbean, Africa, and India. London emerged as the hub of global commerce, and the Royal Navy was the unrivaled guardian of the seas.
Yet, imperial growth was not without challenges. In North America, resentment grew over taxation and the lack of colonial representation in Parliament. The slogan, "No taxation without representation," captured colonial frustrations, culminating in the American Revolution, 1775 to 1783. Britain's defeat and the independence of the United States marked a major setback, but the empire quickly rebounded, focusing on India, Africa, and the Pacific. Domestically, the Georgian era was a period of both refinement and hardship. The reigns of George II and George III witnessed advances in science, literature, and the arts. Figures such as Isaac Newton, Samuel Johnson, and Jane Austen shaped Britain's cultural legacy,
while institutions like the Royal Society advanced scientific thought. But the period was also marked by stark social inequalities, with the rise of industrialization bringing both new wealth and urban poverty. The later years of George III's reign were overshadowed by turmoil. His long struggle with mental illness and Britain's wars with revolutionary and Napoleonic France tested the stability of the monarchy and the nation. Nevertheless, Britain's political system proved resilient. Unlike France, which descended into revolution, Britain managed to navigate the upheavals of the late 18th century while maintaining constitutional government. By the dawn of the 19th century, Britain stood at the threshold of a new age. It had lost 13 colonies in America, but gained a growing empire in Asia and Africa. Its political institutions were stable, its navy unchallenged, and its industries beginning to transform society. The Georgian era, with its mixture of cultural brilliance and global ambition, set the stage for Britain's emergence in the 19th century as the world's preeminent imperial power.
As the 19th century unfolded, Britain entered an era of unprecedented change that would forever reshape its society, economy, and global standing. At the heart of this transformation was the Industrial Revolution, a seismic shift from agrarian economies to mechanized industry. Britain, with its coal and iron resources, innovative inventors, and expanding markets, became the cradle of modern industrialization. Steam engines, textile mills, and railways revolutionized production and transportation, turning cities like Manchester, Birmingham, and Liverpool into thriving industrial hubs. This rapid growth, however, was not without cost. The new working class endured long hours, harsh conditions, and poor living standards in crowded urban centers. Child labor and unsafe factories sparked growing calls for reform. Over time, legislation such as the Factory Acts began to address these issues, reflecting the gradual rise of social consciousness in British politics. Meanwhile, the middle class, composed of industrialists, merchants, and professionals, grew in wealth and influence, reshaping Britain's social hierarchy. The reign of Queen Victoria, 1837 to 1901, came to define the age. Her nearly 64 years on the throne witnessed the expansion of both empire and industry, making Britain the world's foremost global power. The Victorian age became synonymous with moral discipline, strict social codes, and a sense of national pride. London emerged as the political, cultural, and financial center of the world, while the British Empire stretched across continents, earning the title the Empire on which the sun never sets. Politically, Britain pursued gradual but steady reforms. The Reform Acts of 1832, 1867, and 1884 expanded the franchise, slowly moving the country toward wider democratic representation. Parliament remained the key to governance, and the monarchy, though symbolic, embodied stability and tradition. Leaders such as Benjamin Disraeli and William Gladstone dominated the political landscape. Their debates over imperial policy, social reform, and economic development shaped the course of the nation.
The empire itself became both a source of pride and tension. India, administered after the Sepoy Rebellion of 1857, was called the jewel in the crown of the empire. British influence extended deep into Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. The empire facilitated trade, spreading British language, culture, and institutions worldwide. But it also generated fierce resistance, local uprisings, and debates over morality, exploitation, and race. Victorian Britain was also a hub of intellectual and cultural brilliance. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution challenged traditional beliefs, while authors such as Charles Dickens, Charlotte Bronte, and Thomas Hardy gave vivid portrayals of industrial society and human struggle. Advances in science, medicine, and engineering, from the telegraph to antiseptic surgery, reinforced Britain's role as a pioneer of modernity. By the end of the century, Britain stood at the zenith of its power. Its navy ruled the seas. Its empire encompassed a quarter of the globe, and its industries produced the goods that fueled global trade. Yet beneath this grandeur, challenges loomed. Growing competition from the United States and Germany, rising labor movements, and calls for Irish independence. These tensions foreshadowed the struggles of the 20th century. Still, the Victorian age remains etched in history as the era when Britain not only transformed itself through industrial might, but also projected its influence across the world, shaping the modern age in profound ways.
The dawn of the 20th century marked both continuity and change for Britain. The death of Queen Victoria in 1901 ended the longest reign in British history to that time and ushered in the Edwardian era under King Edward VII. The Edwardian years were remembered for their elegance, cultural refinement, and relative stability. But beneath this glittering surface lay rising tensions. Industrial strikes, demands for women's suffrage, and the persistent Irish question revealed that the kingdom was not immune to social unrest. Internationally, Britain faced growing challenges to its supremacy. The rapid rise of Germany's industrial and naval power directly threatened Britain's dominance. In response, Britain forged crucial alliances with France and Russia, forming the Triple Entente that would later define the balance of power in Europe. When World War I erupted in 1914, Britain entered the conflict alongside its allies, thrusting the nation into a struggle of unprecedented scale. The war demanded mass mobilization. Millions of men served in the trenches, while women entered factories, farms, and hospitals, proving indispensable to the war effort. Battles such as the Somme and Ypres symbolized both the heroism and the horror of the war, as entire generations were scarred by loss and sacrifice. The war ended in 1918 with victory for the Allies, but the cost was staggering: over 700,000 British soldiers killed, and the economy strained by debt and destruction. The aftermath of the war brought both progress and turmoil. In 1918, women over 30 gained the right to vote, followed by universal suffrage a decade later, marking a new chapter in British democracy. At the same time, Britain faced economic depression, labor strikes, and the growing independence movements within its empire. Most significantly, in 1921, the Anglo-Irish Treaty created the Irish Free State, while Northern Ireland remained part of the United Kingdom, reshaping the political map of the British Isles.
The 1930s tested Britain once more. The global Great Depression brought mass unemployment and economic hardship, though Britain weathered the crisis better than some European nations. Meanwhile, the rise of fascism in Germany and Italy and militarism in Japan posed grave threats to global stability. Britain, under Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, pursued a policy of appeasement, most famously at the Munich Agreement of 1938, in an attempt to preserve peace. But this fragile hope collapsed when Germany invaded Poland in 1939 and Britain once again declared war. World War II, 1939 to 1945, plunged Britain into its darkest and most heroic hour. In 1940, after the fall of France, Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany. Under the indomitable leadership of Winston Churchill, the nation endured the Battle of Britain, where the Royal Air Force successfully repelled German air assaults. The Blitz brought devastation to London and other cities, but the resilience of the British people became legendary. As the war progressed, Britain allied with the United States and the Soviet Union, contributing decisively to the defeat of the Axis powers. From D-Day in Normandy 1944 to the final victory in 1945, British forces played a central role in liberating Europe. Yet the war also left the nation deeply exhausted, financially weakened, and facing the imminent decline of its global empire. By 1945, Britain emerged victorious, but profoundly changed. The old Edwardian confidence had given way to a new realism. The empire would not last forever, and the sacrifices of 2 world wars demanded a rethinking of Britain's role in the modern world. Still, the nation's endurance during its finest hour had cemented its place in history as a beacon of courage and resilience. The end of World War II in 1945 was both a triumph and a reckoning for Britain. Victorious yet drained, the nation faced massive war debts, widespread destruction, and a weary population demanding change. In the historic general election of 1945, Winston Churchill, though hailed as the savior of Britain, was unexpectedly defeated. The Labour Party, led by Clement Attlee, swept to power with a promise of rebuilding society on the foundations of fairness and equality. This ushered in a period of radical reform. The National Health Service, NHS, was created in 1948, offering universal health care free at the point of use, a revolutionary model admired around the world. Nationalization of major industries, expansion of social welfare, and housing projects sought to rebuild the nation and ensure a safety net for all citizens. Yet these policies came at a time of severe economic austerity. Rationing continued into the 1950s, and Britain relied heavily on American loans through the Marshall Plan to stabilize its economy. At the same time, the post-war era marked the beginning of decolonization. The jewel of the empire, India, achieved independence in 1947, followed by Pakistan, setting off a wave of liberation movements across Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean. Over the next 3 decades, Britain gradually dismantled its vast empire, often reluctantly and amid violent struggles. While leaders spoke of a Commonwealth of Nations to preserve ties, it was clear that Britain's role as a global imperial power was ending.
Domestically, the 1950s and 1960s saw a period of relative prosperity, consumer growth, and cultural transformation. Rock and roll, the Beatles, the swinging 60s, and London's emergence as a global cultural capital marked an era of optimism and creativity. The welfare state expanded, living standards rose, and Britain experienced a baby boom. Yet social tensions persisted. Immigration from former colonies reshaped the country's demographics, fueling both diversity and episodes of racial conflict. Politically, the 2-party system of Labour and Conservatives dominated, with alternating governments managing Britain's declining global role. The Conservatives, under Harold Macmillan, promised that most of our people have never had it so good, while Labour governments sought to strengthen social protections. However, by the 1970s, Britain was plagued by deep economic challenges, high inflation, strikes by powerful trade unions, and a series of energy crises created what was called the sick man of Europe. Meanwhile, Britain's relationship with Europe was debated fiercely. After years of hesitation and failed applications, Britain finally joined the European Economic Community in 1973, signaling a shift toward closer integration with its continental neighbors. The post-war decades were thus a paradox. Britain was no longer the globe-spanning empire of the Victorian age, yet it remained a crucial player on the world stage. Domestically, it had transformed itself into a welfare state with an enduring commitment to social democracy. But the turbulence of the 1970s made clear that new political directions were needed, setting the stage for the rise of Margaret Thatcher and a decisive turn toward a new era. The turbulent 1970s, marked by strikes, inflation, and economic stagnation, created the conditions for a seismic political shift in Britain. In 1979, Margaret Thatcher, leader of the Conservative Party, became the first woman to serve as Prime Minister in British history. Her rise marked the beginning of a new era, one that would reshape Britain's economy, politics, and society in profound and controversial ways. Thatcher's government rejected the post-war consensus of state intervention and welfare expansion. Instead, she championed free market economics, privatization, and individual enterprise. State-owned industries such as British Telecom, British Gas, and British Airways were sold off to private investors, symbolizing a sweeping retreat of government from the economy. Trade unions, once powerful forces that had brought down governments in the 1970s, were systematically weakened through new laws and dramatic confrontations, most famously the miners' strike of 1984-85, a bitter conflict that left scars on communities across the nation. Her economic policies, often called Thatcherism, prioritized controlling inflation over reducing unemployment. The early years of her rule saw deep recession and rising joblessness, but over time, the British economy began to stabilize and grow. Financial deregulation in the late 1980s turned London into a global financial hub, further transforming Britain into a service-driven economy. Yet, critics argued that her policies widened inequality, eroded social protections, and devastated traditional working-class industries, especially in the north of England, Scotland, and Wales. Internationally, Thatcher was a formidable presence. Her close partnership with U.S. President Ronald Reagan symbolized the strength of the Anglo-American alliance during the final phase of the Cold War. Both leaders shared a belief in free markets, strong defense, and opposition to communism. Thatcher also faced one of the most defining moments of her premiership in 1982, when Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands, a British overseas territory in the South Atlantic. In a dramatic display of resolve, she dispatched a naval task force that successfully reclaimed the islands, bolstering her popularity at home and cementing her reputation as the Iron Lady.
On Europe, however, Thatcher's legacy was more divisive. Britain's membership in the European Economic Community, EEC, deepened in the 1980s, but Thatcher remained skeptical of greater European integration. Her 1988 Bruges speech, in which she warned against turning the EEC into a federal superstate, foreshadowed decades of political battles over Britain's place in Europe. By the late 1980s, after 3 consecutive election victories, Thatcher seemed unassailable. Yet her uncompromising leadership style and controversial policies, such as the deeply unpopular poll tax, eroded support within her own party. In 1990, amid mounting dissent, she was forced to resign, though she left behind a political legacy that would define Britain for generations. The 1990s brought both continuity and change. Thatcher's successor, John Major, continued many of her economic policies while steering Britain through the Gulf War and signing the Maastricht Treaty, which formally established the European Union. Domestically, however, his government faced economic challenges, including the 1992 crisis known as Black Wednesday, when Britain was forced to withdraw from the European exchange rate mechanism. Meanwhile, the 1990s were also a period of cultural and social transformation. Cool Britannia, fueled by Britpop bands like Oasis and Blur, the rise of new British cinema and renewed national confidence projected a modern, vibrant image of the country. By the end of the decade, however, political winds were shifting once again. After 18 years of conservative rule, the Labour Party, reinvented under Tony Blair's New Labour, swept to power in 1997, promising a fresh vision for Britain in the new millennium. The Conservative Party's long dominance came to an end in 1997 when Tony Blair and his rebranded New Labour swept to power in a landslide victory. Blair promised a third way that would combine economic dynamism with social justice, appealing to both traditional Labour supporters and middle-class voters. His government embodied optimism, modernization, and a sense that Britain was entering a new era. One of Blair's early successes was the advancement of constitutional reforms. Devolution gave Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland their own assemblies and parliaments, reshaping the United Kingdom into a more decentralized state. In Northern Ireland, Blair played a pivotal role in brokering the Good Friday Agreement, 1998, which brought a fragile peace after decades of sectarian violence known as the Troubles. These achievements elevated his international reputation and strengthened the image of a renewed, inclusive Britain. Economically, New Labour embraced much of Thatcher's free market legacy while expanding investment in public services. Blair and his chancellor, Gordon Brown, maintained fiscal discipline while channeling funds into education, health, and welfare programs. Britain experienced steady growth and low unemployment throughout much of the early 2000s, reinforcing Blair's popularity. Culturally, the late 1990s and early 2000s were marked by the phenomenon of Cool Britannia, a wave of cultural confidence symbolized by Britpop music, fashion, and film. London was celebrated as a global city, while Britain increasingly projected itself as an open, modern, and diverse society.
However, Blair's premiership became overshadowed by foreign policy controversies. After the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, Britain stood firmly alongside the United States in the war on terror. British forces joined the U.S. in the invasion of Afghanistan in 2001, and more controversially, in the 2003 Iraq War. Blair's decision to support U.S. President George W. Bush, based on disputed claims about weapons of mass destruction, provoked mass protests at home and eroded public trust in his leadership. Though he won a third term in 2005, his popularity never fully recovered, and in 2007 he stepped down, handing power to Gordon Brown. Brown's tenure, 2007 to 2010, was defined by the global financial crisis. Initially praised for his decisive action in stabilizing the banking system, his government struggled with rising debt, unemployment, and austerity debates. The crisis exposed vulnerabilities in Britain's economic model, which had become heavily reliant on financial services and global markets. At the same time, new challenges emerged on the domestic front. Immigration, social integration, and debates about multiculturalism became increasingly contentious issues in British politics. Britain's role in the European Union also grew more divisive, with growing segments of the public and political class questioning the costs and benefits of membership. By the 2010 general election, Labour had been in power for 13 years, but was weakened by economic woes and political fatigue. The result was a hung parliament, leading to the formation of a coalition government between the Conservatives, led by David Cameron, and the Liberal Democrats, led by Nick Clegg. This marked a new chapter in British politics, one that would be defined by austerity, debates over national identity, and the looming question of Britain's future in Europe.
The Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition, formed in 2010, marked the beginning of a turbulent new era in British history. Under Prime Minister David Cameron, the government embarked on a program of austerity, aiming to reduce the deficit through spending cuts and welfare reforms. Supporters hailed it as necessary fiscal discipline, while critics argued that it deepened inequality and weakened public services. Cameron also sought to modernize the Conservative Party, presenting a more socially liberal image. Yet he faced growing pressure from within his own ranks and from the rising UK Independence Party UKIP, which channeled public discontent over immigration and Britain's relationship with the European Union. In an effort to silence internal dissent, Cameron promised a national referendum on EU membership. In 2016, Britain voted by a narrow margin, 52% to 48%, to leave the European Union. The decision shocked the political establishment and divided the nation. While supporters of Brexit hailed it as a reclaiming of sovereignty, opponents warned of economic turmoil and international isolation. Cameron, who had campaigned to remain, resigned the next day. He was succeeded by Theresa May, who struggled to negotiate Britain's exit terms amid deep divisions in Parliament and society. Her premiership was consumed by repeated battles over Brexit, culminating in her resignation in 2019. Boris Johnson, a charismatic but polarizing figure, replaced her with a promise to get Brexit done. Under his leadership, the UK formally left the EU on January 31st, 2020, ending nearly half a century of membership.
From its beginnings as a collection of Celtic tribes on the misty isles of the North Atlantic, through Roman conquest, Anglo-Saxon settlement, Norman domination, and centuries of dynastic struggles, Britain has continually reshaped itself in response to crisis and change. The rise of Parliament, the triumph of the rule of law, and the forging of a constitutional monarchy distinguish it from much of continental Europe and laid the foundations for a political culture that valued both tradition and reform. The early modern period witnessed Britain's transformation into a global maritime power, its empire extending across oceans and continents. The Industrial Revolution then propelled it into the forefront of technological progress, while at home, social upheavals and political reforms reshaped the very fabric of British society. The two world wars of the 20th century tested the nation's resilience to its limits, yet also reinforced its capacity for unity and adaptation. In the post-war era, Britain experienced both decline and renewal. The dismantling of empire, the rise of the welfare state, and entry into and eventual departure from the European Union. Each stage reflected the nation's struggle to reconcile its deep historical identity with the demands of an ever-changing world. Today, Britain stands as a country that embodies paradox, an island that once commanded an empire but now seeks a new place in a multipolar world. A monarchy steeped in ceremony, yet operating within a democratic framework. A society rooted in tradition, but constantly negotiating change. Its story is not one of uninterrupted ascent or inevitable decline, but of resilience, of a people and a nation continually redefining themselves. The history of Britain, from antiquity to the present, is thus not only a chronicle of kings and battles, parliaments and revolutions, but also a testament to the enduring ability of a nation to adapt, reinvent, and endure. It is a reminder that history is never static, and that Britain, shaped by its past, continues to write its future on the stage of the modern world.